Elon Musk's approach in Twitter has been chaotic and it's been destructive. Elon Musk is never far away from the headlines. Since he took over the reins of Twitter in October, we've had heaps of questions about his leadership style from our community at No Bullshit Leadership. His well-storied approach to Twitter's employees begs the question: is Elon just demanding results that are going to improve the company, or is he out of line in how he's handling things? Now, of course, I'm going to preface this by saying my only source of information are the same sources you have: media reports and Musk's own statements on his favourite platform, which of course is Twitter. And I do have some observations on all of this. I am a massive fan of setting high standards for performance and for leaders being the catalyst to drive and enforce those standards throughout the organisation, to embed those standards in the culture. It's really the only way to run a company if you want to be successful in the longer term. But from what I've read, Elon Musk's approach in Twitter has been chaotic and it's been destructive. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to tell your employees that you have high expectations for the standard of their work and the extent of their commitment to the job. This can act as a sort of filter for anyone who might be thinking of joining the company, or for those who are trying to decide whether they should stay or go. But telling people you expect the job to be their lives with total commitment simply won't suit everyone. There has to be some major incentive for that type of dedication. Now, Musk is, by reputation, a serious workaholic, which you might expect. But he gets to make that choice because he owns the company. Question is, what's in it for the workers? Unless they have some skin in the game for Twitter's success, why would they dedicate their whole lives to making Elon richer? Now, large companies handle this with long-term incentive schemes that give executives share allocations over time based on the company's performance. But these rarely extend to the rank-and-file employees. And Musk seems to be demanding this level of dedication from every individual, even in the most junior roles. Sort of interesting. Now, having said that, you can bet your life that there are going to be thousands of people who are lining up for the opportunity to work for Elon Musk. Despite his eccentric and brash approach, he's still the richest person on the planet, and he's done pretty well with both SpaceX and Tesla. But as we know, not all great visionaries are great leaders. Now, the concept of telling people that you demand total dedication from them when it comes to their careers isn't really new. Long before Elon captured the public eye, Ivan Glasenberg, the chief executive of commodities trader Glencore, was giving us lessons on employee commitment. He was once quoted as saying, "Don't work for Glencore if you want work-life balance. You want to work here, we expect total commitment to your career. In return, we'll make you very rich." Now, in Musk's case, he seems to have gone about this by sending a letter to all of his existing employees, basically giving them an ultimatum. Commit to rebuilding Twitter by dedicating your lives to the cause, or I'll expect your resignation by 5 p.m. tomorrow. And this comes on the back of terminating half the company's workforce a few weeks prior to that, removing a bunch of contractors, and sacking the few people who had the temerity to disagree with his approach. Now, that is a really bad sign. The lack of healthy debate and robust challenge. I produced a podcast episode on this a while back that examined the same problem in Theranos, the biotech startup that eventually collapsed. Just a few weeks ago, by the by, Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of Theranos, was sentenced to 11 years in jail as a result of the fraud. That verdict was certainly a win for our confidence in the global system of commerce. But an intolerance for challenge and disagreement is a really unhealthy cultural marker. It pushes dissent underground and sets up a culture of fear and retribution. Definitely not the culture that you'd want in a company, and Musk has sent a very clear signal to people who are left at Twitter. It's my way or the highway. On top of that, whenever a leader does something reactionary or precipitous or reflexive, people lose faith in the whole system. Every single person who remains at Twitter will be sleeping with one eye open because it breeds distrust and fear. Most employees are going to be hedging their bets and exploring the job market just in case. and their focus certainly won't be on rebuilding Twitter version 2. There's also the problem of how Musk communicated. Managing by tweet or managing by press release just isn't very helpful. Now, we know that sensitive communication that affects people's livelihoods should be a little more considered and compassionate. And I always think of the case of the CEO at Better.com, who sacked 900 people via Zoom in early 2022. That's a really good example of how not to communicate with people when something affects their lives. So even if Musk has a good plan for how to rebuild the Twitter workforce, and eventually the product itself, it's a poor way to go about it. He's missed a couple of really key leadership principles. And the first is about employee turnover. Now, when you take an undifferentiated approach, as Musk has done, the broadside to every employee, you don't get the opportunity to shape the type of turnover you get. And as we know, there are two types of turnover: desirable turnover and undesirable turnover. So you'd be really happy to see some people leave the company. That's desirable turnover. But you'll have a whole bunch of people who choose to leave who you actually really needed, and you would have preferred that they stay. That type of turnover is undesirable turnover. You don't want it. And this leads me on to my big issue with voluntary redundancy programs. The good people leave because it's really lucrative and they know they can get another job by next Monday. Your poor performers, on the other hand, well, they stay. Because even though they might have the opportunity to cash in, they know they can't easily get another job elsewhere, certainly not one that pays like that. It might reduce your headcount and labour cost, but it also massively weakens the gene pool of your workforce. The result is you have less people of a lower average quality to try to produce the same results. Just not the smartest way to build for a profitable future. Now, no doubt, Musk would have benefited from being a little more surgical, finding out who the best people were and which of the current roles were key to the organisation. That is talent management 101. So even in a company with a relatively flat structure, when you have thousands of employees, there are layers of leaders who should be providing these insights and delivering the messages. It seems as though this particular step was missed altogether, and I know it's a trade-off with speed. But when decisions are made at the wrong level, for example too high up, they're often too far removed from the action to be good decisions. Now, as we know from our no bullshit leadership decision-making framework, decisions should be made as close as possible to the core expertise that's required to make them. So what we can see at Twitter so far is a lack of rational planning, blanket mandates, unwillingness to tap into the knowledge and expertise of the existing Twitter talent, and a clear lack of care for the individual. What could possibly go wrong? But of course, you'd never bet against a guy like Elon Musk. Despite this chaotic and brutal start to his tenure as the chief twit, as he calls it, he's still likely to move this thing forward. And in all likelihood, Twitter will still attract and retain some really good people. But it could have been handled so differently. He could have got way better outcomes by being just a little more considered and a little more surgical in how he went about it. As it stands now with the current Twitter talent, some people will stay for the money. Some will stay because they're not very good, and they're even afraid to step out into a very forgiving job market as we have today. Some will stay because they're risk averse by nature. Some will stay because they believe in the mission. And many more will come because they get a chance to work with Elon.